Hello, everyone. Welcome to Org 610 Nonprofit Program Plan and Evaluation. This is week 4, and this is Charlie's connecting tips for you for this lesson. This week, it's all about stating the activities that you're going to orchestrate or bring about the facilitation of a person's changes. Well, that sounds really wordy. All I mean is you're going to tell the organization how you're going to bring about the changes. That's what I meant to say. Yeah. And not only are you going to have to talk about why you chose specific activities, but where you place them in the program stream as well. So that's two different things, okay? Why you chose a certain activity and why you placed it where you did within the program structure. You're going to have to provide rationale for those two layers. And since you're working in a faith-based organization, you're also going to need to be able to discuss the theological background as well, or the rationale for why you're choosing specific activities. Now, for something like, I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but for something like housing first, and the rationale for that could be, well, in Matthew 5 and 6, we have the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus is talking about meeting felt needs of people. Someone is sick, you take care of them. If they're hungry, you feed them. If they're naked, you give them clothes. It's that kind of an idea where you're validating who a person is. So it's that kind of thing you're getting to. So when you're thinking about the activities that you're going to use, ask yourself the question, how am I going to facilitate change in this person? The answer to that is the key to a great intervention or activity. Same thing. Then you're going to plot out your interventions and map them to each outcome. So as you think about your activities, bring up last week's outcomes, and you could even start with the outcomes and say, okay, how am I going to bring about or facilitate this short-term outcome? Look at your intermediate outcomes. How am I going to facilitate the change in this person to bring about this intermediate outcome? And then lastly, as you look at the condition, what activity will be instrumental in bringing about this person's change in condition or change in status? So that's one way to get at it, by working backwards. The danger is if you start out with an activity, then you could be getting off track because you don't know if that activity is really going to apply to that person's outcome. And then lastly is make sure that your theological rationale makes sense. And like I just alluded to, I'd stick with stories versus specific passages. And that allows you to drive down into the underlying principle that's in that text that transcends culture and transcends time. And so I'd stick with it that way versus being careful that you're not trotting out a Trump verse, so to speak, or a Trump card. So see, this specific verse says this. Well, that may be true, but again, try and get underneath the verse to the intent or the application that really spans culture and time. My perspectives on this professionally, make sure you start with the itch and then work back to the scratch. The itch is what that person needs. You identified that through the purpose statement, the problem statement, and then you also identified that through the needs assessment. So start with that person's itch and then develop the scratch for that itch. Don't start off with a scratch and say, I've got this really cool this really cool scratcher. I sure do hope that it matches the itch that person has. Reminder for you to look at different layers as you're thinking through it. What does the professional literature say? You don't have to look at 50 different journals, but a couple journal articles or even books are going to help you steer your program with the right kinds of activities to bring about change. And then you can benchmark those to see what other people in our sector are doing to see if it makes sense to take that approach. And then realizing that you have to contextualize it. So if you're in we'll use the example of the Maui Rescue Mission, right? So if you're thinking about, starting up a trailer type of ministry, a shower ministry in trailers, that may be problematic in Colorado Springs in the middle of winter. So think about your contextualization of activities and then your own capacity evaluation. It's like, do we have the ability to pull this off? And if not, then you start thinking about your resources. Well, and this is getting to next week, but who could I bring alongside in this program to help bring that capacity about, tied into schools maybe, or different nonprofits. All right, that's the overview for this week. Again, if you've got any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always available with text and whatnot. So we'll talk to you later.